What are the differences between a prophet and a seer? Are the roles similar or are they separate in ancient Israelite religion? Is the role of seer more akin to tribal shamans, such as finding lost items with the aid of divination? Think in 1 Samuel 9 here. And how are such terms linked with soothsayers and being an Ish Elohim, man of God? Has the role of seer disappeared by the Second Temple period?
Well, let's take the man of God one first. Man of God is a phrase that's used, not a lot in the Old Testament. I mean, it's not rare, but it's used to refer to several different things. It's used, for instance, of the angel of the Lord in Judges 13. I mean, Samson's parents see this individual and hear, what he has to say about, the birth of their son, and they refer to him as Ish, Ish Elohim, Ish Ha Elohim. So there's man of God there. But that's pretty limited. I mean, it's really, when it gets applied to the angel of the Lord, it's only in this passage. And again, you can see why it would be, because they can't, at least the first time around, discern that this is anybody other than a man and telling them what God says. And so it's not surprising we would get this label. Secondly, it is used of named individuals that are spokespeople for God, again, who also received divine revelation. Moses, for instance, Deuteronomy 33:1, Joshua 14:6. David is called, man of God in 2 Chronicles 8:14 and Nehemiah 12:24. Shemaiah, who we don't know much about, gets this label in 1 Kings 12:22. Elijah, all right, Elisha in 1 and 2 Kings, respectively. So you can have a known figure called man of God. And what's interesting is other than David in that list, those people are also called prophets. And that was part of the question, Navi is prophet. We'll get to that in a moment. So right away we can see there's some overlap there. And thirdly, sometimes the phrase is used of an unidentified figure who speaks for God, or again, who could receive divine information, divine revelation. And probably the textbook example of this is 1 Samuel 9, when a man, unidentified man of God, tells Saul about the donkeys and all this sort of thing. So, what is a man of God? Well, it's somebody who, was perceived as being God's spokesperson and could receive divine revelation, divine information, and may or may not be also called a Navi, okay, a prophet. So there's some overlap there. Prophets, as I've wrote in Unseen Realm and have commented elsewhere, prophets are people who speak for God. Now, what these other terms are going to get us into, though, is not so much the reception of divine information, but the how. Is it through a vision? Is it through a dream? Is it an auditory voice? Is it a divine encounter? Is it casting lots or some other form of divination? That's where you get some of this other vocabulary that sort of focuses attention on the how. Again, how are they getting divine revelation? So the question, referenced a few of these terms, but I'll just hit a couple myself here. We have kozeh in Hebrew, which is from the verb kazah, again, to see or to have a vision. Terms used a few times in tandem with ro'eh, which is from ra'ah, to see, so a seer, again, is another term, and navi, of course, which is prophet. It's interesting, in 1 Chronicles 29:29, ro'eh, and trying to think here, which is, let me just click out to the verse, because sometimes they overlap as synonyms, and in other cases, it depends which one it is. So 1 Chronicles 29:29, I think, is worth bringing up. It says this: "Now the acts of King David from first to last are written in the Chronicles of Samuel the seer," and that's ro'eh, "and in the Chronicles of Nathan the prophet," that's navi, "and the Chronicles of Gad the seer," and that is kozeh. So we have two seers here, but the terms are different, ro'eh and kozeh, but they're obviously sort of used in tandem here. And one of the seers, okay, Samuel, of course, is elsewhere called a prophet. The terms don't completely overlap because Nathan is distinguished from Gad in other passages. You have prophets and seers. In some cases, that both of those labels can be attributed to one person, and in other passages, they are kept separate. One guy is a prophet, the other guy is the seer. So it's kind of hard to know, it's kind of hard. Let me just put it this way. It's kind of hard to be categorical and say this one couldn't be that one, just en toto, because there is overlap. But there are circumstances where perhaps a person was perceived as one thing and not the other. It's hard to tell if there's any real consistency here, but there are patterns, at least. In the monarchy narratives, again, what scholars would refer to as the Deuteronomistic history, and what, again, just the lay reader would refer to as the historical texts, historical books, Samuel, Kings, Chronicles, that sort of thing. In those books, prophet and seer are frequently distinguished. Again, Nathan and Gad would be an example. They're mentioned together in a verse, but one is a prophet, the other is seer. And I think, what we have going on here in situations like that is prophets were, of course, oracles. They did get divine information. God spoke to them. Word of the Lord came to, such and said, hey, go over and talk to the king. Okay, that does happen. But seers, that terminology often has something to do with either a vision or a dream, something like that. So it's really kind of the mode of revelation that is being highlighted or distinguished, kind of a subset when we get to this other terminology. And again, we're not saying that prophets couldn't have visions. Okay, all we're saying is that while the Navi could have a vision, the prophet could have a vision. When the term seer is used, that's sort of what that person is known for. That's how, to the community, that it has become known that this person receives divine information. It's through this modus operandi, that sort of thing. One of the sub-questions I think was about, are seers akin to like shamans, again, or people who use methods of divination? Again, that there seems to be a relationship there, so that seems to be the case. Another term is kasam or kesam. These are English translations would be something like medium, or let's just go to the one interesting example here, because you have soothsayer, diviner, medium. The English translations vary so much. So 1 Samuel 28:8. This is the medium at Endor passage, which I've referenced a lot because of the Elohim reference here with the deceased Samuel. But in verse 8 we have, so Saul disguised himself and put on the other garments and went, he and 2 men with him, and they came to the woman by night. And he said, divine for me by a spirit and bring up for me whoever I shall name to you. So the command there to divine is the Hebrew lemma kasam. So right away there's this association of some methodology to solicit the other side and to get divine information. Kasam is typically negative. Here we have the medium at Endor. She's going to be a questionable figure, a negative figure, because of what she's doing, communicating with spirits and whatnot. Deuteronomy 18:10 and verse 14 use this again for forbidden practices. So kasam is a term and a notion that would often be used to reference things that are forbidden or pagan methods of divination or whatnot. Some scholars, though, have speculated, and there's no way to really nail this down, that kasam could mean to cut in pieces, and that would be a reference to creating objects of wood, whether they be lots that are cast or even arrows. There's an episode in one of the I think I'm trying to remember which one of the King's book this is in, but it's not coming to me right now, where the prophetic figure asked, the king, hey, throw down some arrows here, as a sign, and so that sort of thing. Wooden objects that were used to cast lots in some way, or to read in an oracular sense. Again, scholars aren't really sure about that, whether kasam actually means that sort of thing or not, but it is associated with, again, doing something to solicit divine information. Now, for those who are interested in this, I can't post the book. I mean, I did a paper on the Old Testament response to pagan divination, where I pointed out that some of these divination methods that are condemned in Deuteronomy 18 are actually approved elsewhere of prophetic figures. So the paper addresses why that is, and it has to do with who's the source of the information. Is it the true God or something else? It has some divine counsel implications in there. So that's something I could put with this episode to post. But there's actually a book, if those of you who have access to the Divine Council bibliography, there's a whole book on divination by Anne Jeffers, Jeffers, that I found somewhere. But the book is in PDF form, and it's part of that collection. So you could go look that up. Of course, these aren't the only sources on divination, these kinds of terms, but I like Jeffers' book because she has really succinct discussions on all of the terms that are associated in any way with these sorts of individuals, seers, prophets, that sort of thing, and also the terminology of divination. It's really a nice work.